the floor over Angeliki from EAEA. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. I think that we already can also see the wonderful work being done by visuality in our screens. So to kickstart a little bit our event, we would like to, of course, let you know what we've been up to, why are we meeting here, who we are, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will get to it. Should be working. Yes. Okay. So we are here for the final event, as you know, of the Enhanced Learner Voice project, which is an Erasmus Plus project. So we are co-funded by the European Union. It's coordinated by the EAEA, the European Association for the Education of Adults, from where I'm also coming from. And we started working together in December 2023 up until May 2026. So this is our final month. Of course, the work started far before December and will continue far beyond May. But to give you a bit of an idea on when we started, where we're going, this is a bit of our timeline. So our aim through Enhance is to understand that inside the very unique nature of adult education, we have the imperative to make adult learners at the center. So if the adult learners are not actively involved, how can we actually see them shaping it and progressing it to what we want our society at large to look like? So we thought that the very first place to start is to create learning spaces where the educational process is based on the voice of the learner, and that way gets to be more democratic and leads to a much deeper connection with both society and the learning topic at hand. To do all of that, a bunch of organizations came together. We have several associations, the EAEA, the Solidar Foundation, Solidar Plus, and AONTAS, the National Adult Education Organization of Ireland. But we also have local partners included. We have ABC and SINOP from the Netherlands. We have NHE from Hungary. We have Das Kollektiv from Austria, and we have the Farnebo Folk High School from Sweden. We also have a lovely associated partner that is getting funded by the Movizia grant of Switzerland, and that is the Swiss Federation for Adult Learning. So when we got together, how would we reach our aim? So we set three main objectives. One is that we wanted to map existing practices and initiatives that promote active participation and enhancing learners' voices, but we wanted to do that through a critical lens, and we wanted to analyze both the effectivity and the defectivity, and you will see how we did that by creating an interactive and dynamic matrix of very honestly, very caringly, but also critically reviewing several practices across Europe. The second objective of the project is to actually create a tool that is comprehensive, that is holistic, but is also honest to to guide the process of providing space for enhancing the voice of the learners. And we wanted to do that by creating an actual roadmap that organizations, policymakers, and learners could use to actually develop these spaces. And to do that, we also wanted to create the methodology behind this, to create recommendations on how to do this, but to also provide space for the authentic voice of the learners, where we co-created a series of mini books with the learners and for the learners on the topics of breaking the silence, reclaiming their voice, and creating outspoken learning processes for an equitable society. And the last objective that we had is to provide actual voice to the learners, to the educators, and to the stakeholders. And how did we do that? We did that by developing a series of podcasts with discussions on participatory processes and learners' experiences. So as you can understand, the target group of this project is multi-level. We say that we start from a macro level going to a meso level and to the micro level. As a macro level, we understand the policy level, the civil society, and we are concerned with settings that impart knowledge about the basic structures of politics and society. So in the macro level, we don't only see policymakers, we also see civil society, and we also see representatives of learners directly included. For the meso level, we touch upon adult education organizations and networks in which diverse opportunities arise for their relevant positioning in terms of activity in policy. And then in the micro level, we talk about all the people, the content, the methods of the broader adult education community, and specifically adult learners that either as individuals or as communities have been subjected to discriminatory behaviors or have been excluded by the educational process at a bigger scale. So, without further ado, let's see our tools and what we did. And my colleague Hilmi will also be adding the links that you see in your screen to the chat for you to have a bit of a better look. So. To do this mapping that we discussed, we designed an interactive matrix. So we wanted, as we said, to critically analyze the effectiveness and the defectiveness of existing practices, and to also position these practices in a bit of a map, but having not north, south, east, and west as the parts of this compass, we tried to understand the impact and the access of these different processes. So we had, let's say, several areas under which these practices could fall under. So we discussed practices that might be impactful, but with significant challenges in terms of access. We have practices that are accessible with very low impact because of the time or the geographical positioning of the practice. We had also practices with significant challenges, both in terms of impact and of access, although they were practicing participatory methodologies, but we also had good practices that were both accessible and impactful. These practices were collected in all of the countries of the project, but also at the European level. So had practices that the Solidar and EAEA collected from around Europe, but we also had specific practices from Ireland, from Sweden, from Austria, from Hungary, and from the Netherlands. So the key elements around the matrix, because the matrix did not just come out of thin air, is that first we did a comprehensive mapping, really targeting adult learners, adult educators, adult education organizations, and doing interviews with one or two people from each of these practices. And based on that, we collected a data sheet with context, with details, with mentions on the level of participation, and many, many more, which you can find in the matrix. And I will just briefly show you how that works. But we also provided our audience a bit with an insight on how we got there and how we gave this, let's say, score to each of the practices. And for that, we have our little scoreboard following each one of these collection data sheets. Accompanying that, we also have a toolkit of tools and suggestions that came outside of these interviews. and where the people that we interviewed pointed us to in order to help you create other spaces and other practices that equally enhance the learner voice, but also keeping in mind their lessons learned, points of difference, and so on. To really highlight the outcomes of both the effectiveness but also the defective elements of the practices, we collected all of them together, and we followed them with a set of lessons that we saw coming up, and that is what we call persisting challenges and potential lessons, where we address that we saw coming up also in practices that really tried to eliminate them. And these challenges regarding regarded gatekeeping, regarding specific bottlenecks, regarded access, level of consciousness and level of participation, safe space and context, tokenism, the form and type of the educational process, but also how the learner voice was actually achieved. So for all of that to get to that point, we have this specific segment in the data collection sheets on the considerations of the processes. So this meant who can participate, the circumstances of the participation, and also the impact on the communities, the societies, and of course, policy. In this first part, we're going to really dive into the matrix, but we're also going to dive into the podcast. We also have some other tools following that, especially the roadmap and the booklets, but this we will discuss in the second part because they are more, let's say, policy oriented. So jumping into the enhanced podcasts, as we said, our objective was to give voice to the learners and actual authentic voice. So to do that, we again followed our levels, our content areas, our levels of participations, and the levels of our target group. So we had a micro, a meso, and a macro level. In the micro level, we have the voices of the learners. In the meso level, we are discussing practice with learners, with educators, and in the making policy part, we bring everybody together with policymakers, and we discuss the power of participations, the communities for change. We discuss how from the ground up, civil society and learner participation can have a role in European education, and many, many more. We have a total of 29 episodes in our podcasts. And you will see, if you go on our website, that at the European level and in Ireland, we have all the episodes in English, but for the Netherlands, we have them in Dutch. For Austria, we have in German. For Hungary, we have some in English and some in Hungarian. And in Sweden, we have the episodes available in Swedish. So with that, I will just show you briefly our website so that you are free to roam about it, even if you are in one of the groups not touching on the matrix and you only have time to work on the podcast, that you can still see a little bit how all of this works. And I believe that we have a little bit of time to do that. So for the enhanced matrix, you just go to our website at enhancedlearnervoice.com, and you go to enhanced matrix, where you will find our matrix, the toolkit, and the interviews. For the enhanced matrix, we have the European level: Sweden, Ireland, the Netherlands, Austria, Hungary, and Switzerland, but we also can see all of the practices. So by going to one of these, you will find a different case for each of the countries. And you can also review all the practices together. And of course, our funding mechanism, because we mustn't forget how this was possible. But just to give you a bit of an idea of how you use the matrix. Yes, this is what you see. We see impact from 1 to 5 and from 4 to 9. But let's say that you want to actually review what we've done. So you just click on the cross next to each of the practices. You get a short summary and general consideration. You get some keywords and some information on the form type and methodology. But you also get access to the full collection data sheet where we give you all the context and details on the work that we did on the level of participation, the conditions, the type and methodology, the encountered challenges, a discussion on who is the learner, and general considerations going hand in hand with the persisting challenges that we discussed, and of course, the recommended scoring of each of the practices. So how did we get to all of that? You can really explore that by reviewing the matrix background paper that we produced, where we got all of the theory together that led us to what you see. We delved into concepts of the pedagogy of the oppressed and Paulo Freire. We talked about education as a liberating practice through the writings of bell hooks. We used quite specifically and substantially the work of the Council of Europe and the European Commission. And you can find our little background paper here, but you can also find the matrix mechanics that we established, where you can see how we scored the good practices in terms of access, but also in terms of impact, and then see how that translated to the rest of the tool. So accompanying this, you can also find here the toolkit that we discussed and the data sets that came from the interviews, one after the other. Similarly for the podcasts, again, in our website, you can see the enhanced podcasts full list. So you can see first all the episodes split by the level of participation. And in here, you can just click and listen to all of them, but you can also find them separately at a European level, what happened in Ireland, in the Netherlands, Austria, Hungary, and Sweden. You can, of course, listen to them on SoundCloud and YouTube. All the episodes have already been launched on SoundCloud. YouTube is currently being updated, and we will launch another episode, 2 episodes every week. And then we will also have the full podcast, once it's ready, available on Apple Podcasts. So with that, I think that I went slowly through everything, and I thank you for listening and give the floor back to Elisa.
Thanks a lot, Angeliki, for this brilliant first sneak peek into the results of this project, that we're now going to learn more about it thanks to the breakout rooms. Thanks a lot, Angeliki, once again. And now I'm going to announce the breakout rooms. One is going to focus on the matrix that Angeliki presented briefly, and the other one on the podcast. Hilmi, are we all back? Yes. Great. Then thank you all for participating in these 2 breakout sessions. I hope you enjoyed. I'm quite sure you did. I was participating in the one on podcast, but I'm sure the one on the matrix was just as interesting as the one I could take part in directly. Thanks a lot to Alexandra and Larissa for facilitating these sessions. And we've already been discussing a lot, although we're still in the first part of the conference. So I would like to invite Pauline and Maria to share what they have been working on with the graphic recording so far, so that we can help all this content sinking in before we move on to the next part. And I think this means we should spotlight them. Yes. Maria, we can see you in the spotlight. Would you like to share with us what you've been working on so far? Here we see it there. So it's already a lot that we can enjoy already visually, I have to say. Thank you. And also appreciate in content. And there's going to be even more. Thanks a lot, Maria. This is really lovely to see. And Pauline with the one on the matrix. Also very beautiful. A lot of content there as well. I'm really curious and looking forward to see the final result because it's already so much there that I'm sure it's going to be a very, very enriching result we're going to enjoy at the end. Thank you, Pauline and Maria, for all this work, and of course for all the people who have contributed to this result by sharing their knowledge and experience. And speaking of people who are going to share knowledge and experience, we're going to now have 10 minutes of practices sharing from other realities from the outer world of the Enhance project. And I know Nuala and Julie had volunteered for sharing their practical example of the Learner Voice project. So I would like to invite them for 5 minutes each presentation of their project, and of course to share any resources in the chat you would like the other participants to be aware of. Nuala from Cork College, would you like to start?
Noala, I think you're muted.
Yes, we can
Apologies.
see.
Thank you. You can see my screen?
And now we can also hear you.
That helps. Thank you. Okay. So thanks very much for the opportunity. I just want to talk to you about a project we developed 2 years ago. So in 2024, we had 3 elections in Ireland. We had a European election, we had a local election, we had a general election, sorry, 4 elections, and we had a referendum. So we were very keen to get adult learners to register to vote. There was a lot of public apathy about the electoral system and politics in general. And in Ireland, 1 in 5 adults has difficulties with basic reading and writing. So we were particularly targeting adults with difficulties reading and writing. We wanted to teach them about about democracy, to promote democracy and active citizenship. So I was very impressed by your micro, meso, and macro level. I suppose this is more a supra level. It was outside of the organization. It was at a public level. So I've shared the link and the QR code there to a Wakelet. So this tells you a little bit about our project. So it started looking at an active citizenship workbook. So some of our tutors, they were a little bit nervous teaching adults about voting and democracy. They didn't understand fully the electoral system. So we put this handbook together for tutors to teach students at a basic level. So it covered democracy, the local council system, the general elections, the president, the referendums. It also covered the European elections, covered how to vote and how to use your voice. Tutors could dip in and dip out of it. They didn't have to use it from start to finish. So just a little bit about the aims of the project. It was a collaborative, interagency, holistic support for those who are disenfranchised through literacy difficulties or lack of education. We wanted to raise critical awareness about decision making, and we wanted to increase the numbers learning to vote. So we've printed this handbook as well, and it's available in our centres. But it's available online if you wanted to adapt it to do something similar. So there was some ground rules were very important at the start because sometimes a student or a learner can say something in a class that can be very controversial. So it was very important to have ground rules at the start. The teaching approach was very much learner-centered, building on what the learners knew, and a participatory approach. And that project went so well that, apologies, if I can go back to the Wakelet, we decided to develop an online course. So we developed a course on Articulate 360 that was self-directed and that students could follow through. Sorry, I just need to get to the next tab, sorry. So when you click on the link there, you go to, my menu is in the way there. Oh, no. Apologies. So if I can, apologies. So this course, when you start, there's a brief introduction. And so when you start, you get the option to do the course in 3 languages. So we translated it into Irish, our native language. We also translated it into Ukrainian and Polish because we have a large number of Ukrainians and Polish people living in Ireland. Anybody who was resident in the country was eligible to vote in local elections. So a lot of our new immigrants were not aware that they could vote in local elections. And actually, when we launched it, a lot of the councillors were not available, not aware that they could vote also. So it's a self-directed course that takes you through the content similar to the handbook. I'll just show you the European Union section as an example. So the learner can read the instructions about the European Union. It's also interactive. So you can click on and you can find out who can vote, how many MEPs, and at the end of each section, there's a quiz. So you can check yourself. So I got 75% in the quiz, so I passed. And you have to pass a section to continue on to the next section. So I think that's just a whistle-stop tour. In our discussion on the matrix, Paula, who's one of our learners, was involved with the project, and she was really a valuable member of the team. She stressed the importance of including information for adults with disabilities, things like making sure the voting centres are accessible, that the table is at the right height for somebody who's a wheelchair user, that there's a Braille option available. So the learner participation in this project was invaluable. So you can click on the link there and explore it. It's very much Irish centred, but maybe you could adapt something similar in your own countries. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Nuala, also for sticking perfectly to the time. And I'm sure, thanks also to the link you shared, many more are going to explore the resources you just presented. Thank you so much. Absolutely interesting project. I know Julie also had expressed interest. I did not see her among the participants, though.
I'm here.
You're there, sorry. Then it's me who could not see.
Share my screen.
Thanks a lot.
Oh, I don't know if you can see this.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I wanted to present 2 different projects that we have good practices for. First of all, I'm maybe going to present myself. My name is Julie. I'm a project officer at CMOP Policy Center, and we're an NGO, a Greek NGO. We're the Brussels branch, and we're based in Brussels, and we're implementing EU projects for social innovations. So we're working on a lot of different topics, including social isolation for older adults. And so we have 2 good practices to share today. One for the first project, which is the Legend project. This is a project where basically we try to enhance older adults' digital competencies by starting from their own interest. So first of all, we start by coming directly from their local histories and stories and memories. So we're trying to find a way to enhance digital literacy as an extension of their own interest. And to do so, basically, we have put a kind of mentorship program. So we foster intergenerational engagement with young people. So the way it works is that older people will share stories about their local neighborhoods, memories from their youth, etc. And the youth, in exchange, will accompany them in creating digital stories around those memories. So to do so, we started from a first point, which is that we needed to really stem from the learner's experience. So we did this through 3 different steps. The first step was to conduct surveys and focus group with seniors to map out their experiences in terms of digital literacy, their fears, as well as their interests. And we built curriculum modules from these inputs, which made them personalizable and anchored in local story and places from the examples they provided us with. And as a third step, we are currently implementing pilot workshops. So we're collecting feedback to refine the program. And we found that having this approach really made the module all the more engaging and also allowed us to find more participants through personal connections. The second good practice I wanted to share is concerning the garden project, which is a project that we have finished working on. And it was, in very short summary, it was a project whose aim was to transform community gardens across Europe into local learning centers for adult education. And so the way we implemented it was by not imposing a fixed program. Instead, we let adult learners co-own the learning environment. So they were the ones shaping, taking decisions, and debating. And we found that when we really had this place of letting learning happen through doing and also through community dialogue, and once again stemming from interest first, we had way more skills developed as well as engagement and also participation. So the point I wanted to make from both projects is that although they address both very different subjects, they were both built on the same underlying approach. So they were about learning the learner's voice shape what comes next into the activities. And in both cases, the adults were really co-creators of the programs, and we found that the engagement followed naturally throughout the project, and it made it all the more interesting for everybody, including the educators. And overall, I wanted to show that these 2 examples show that learner voices are not really specific to a certain themes or to a format, but it is mostly a transferable approach. And it really changed for us in our implementation of the projects, how we built it and how our adult learners related to it, and effectively also how effective both of the projects are proving to be so far. So yes, that is my very short presentation for you.
As short as we needed for the program to unfold smoothly. So thanks a lot, Julie, also for this great work of summarizing so many results and interesting inputs. And once again, please share, if not done already, in the chat the resources that we can explore to learn more about these projects. Thanks a lot to both you and Nuala and everyone else who has participated in the discussion so far. We're now going to have a comfortable break of about 20 minutes. And we're going to come back at 11:30 for the second part of the conference. I hope most of you, if not all of you, can stay with us. We're going to discuss about the policy dimension of the project and, importantly, we hope, the policy impact we can have, also thanks to the participation of some policymakers and other stakeholders. Thank you. Ready to start again for the second part of the final conference on the Enhance project. For this, we're happy to continue with some practices and this participatory approach that we've been implementing and promoting in the project, but we also wanted to have here present in the final conference to properly reflect the spirit of this project as well. And for this, we have, as we move to the policy part of this conference, we have an example to be shared by Pambos from the Cardet as an organization. Pambos, I see you there. And I would like to invite you to share your example from Cyprus, I assume.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you and to participate in this. Let me share my screen. All right. I think now you see my screen.
Yes.
My name is Pambos, full name Haralambos Brasidas. I wear 2 hats. I'm director at Cardet. Cardet is an independent non-profit based in Cyprus, active for the last 25 years in the areas of education, learning, and civic engagement. I will share an example with you that has to do with a project that was implemented in partnership with UNICEF and the Ministry of Health. The focus of the project was on supporting mental health care and well-being for vulnerable children and young people, okay? And this was a digital reform project. It was supported by technical support instrument. So how does this work? The government, the Ministry of Health in this case from Cyprus, requested technical support from digital reform, and then a project was awarded to UNICEF to implement this project. And then UNICEF came to Cyprus and selected us as an NGO active in this field to support them to implement it. So this was implemented in collaboration with the Youth Board, Youth Council, Ministry of Health, and UNICEF. So at the forefront, we have the serious key issue of mental health. Unfortunately, we waited for COVID to realize how important of an issue is, and particularly in Cyprus, we have very high rates. 1 in 3 children experience some mental health issues, and 86% of young people reported high levels of anxiety, and so on. I will provide a link with all the research at the end, whoever wants to look at it, and I can also share the slides. Now, the key beneficiaries now, talking about participation, were from the beginning youth boards. In Cyprus, there are 2 formal youth organizations. It's the Youth Board and the Youth Council. And they are the network of all youth NGOs and so on. So they were participating in the project from the very beginning. Now, it aimed for 2 main outcomes. One is the youth engagement framework. So I was happy to see earlier in one of the breakout the Ludi model, because a lot of this work was also based on that, of youth participation. How we can give learners and young people a voice on policies that impact their daily lives, among which is mental health support, and then to do capacity building and education and learning opportunities for them. Now, the context for this was that, you know, we knew from the fact that there is a big gap in Cyprus. There is a whole research report. I'm not going to focus on the research report itself, but I will stay on the method, the participation of youth, and the key findings, okay? But the idea is that in the first 6 months were in-depth research, qualitative research. We did interviews, focus groups with young people, practitioners working with youth councils in rural areas. We actually went to refugee camps where there are vulnerable groups, and we also did research there to collect everybody's voice and then try to come up with the key elements that we need to consider when we give youth a voice. Following that, what we did, there was a summary of all the key issues and challenges. The most important that always comes up is stigma, you know, the stigma of mental health. How can you go and ask for mental health support when there is such a label on it? The lack of youth-friendly services. How do we do that? How do we design these services for youth? And what role can youth play in delivering these services? The lack of our awareness, the lack of accessibility, the insufficient services. There are not enough professionals to offer this support. So one of the deliverables, for example, was a mental health first aid course. How do we train youth workers, teachers, counselors to act as mental health first aiders, and so on? So a lot of the recommendations that came out from the report and were presented to the ministry were the policy framework. There isn't a legal framework, there wasn't. Now there is, of how to do that. And we were lucky, quote unquote, because this project was starting when the government started launching the process to establish a national mental health strategy. And for the first time now, because of this project, there was a contribution to the national mental health strategy with the angle of youth. And now in one of the working groups, youth representatives participate, which was a big success regarding impact, because this now is institutionalized, the support they will be able to collect. So all these challenges were addressed, but let's go now to the engagement and giving them a voice. One of the deliverables of the project was youth engagement. So how do we give youth a voice? And what does that mean? And some of the core elements we agreed with all stakeholders that it has to be inclusive with the broader definition of the term. It has to be participatory, transparent, and youth-friendly. But one of the elements that we always see there is a gap in all youth engagement approaches is the bottom line is who makes the final decision. I mean, because the engagement on youth in the process or learner's voice in a process can be from a simple survey, I know continuum, to actually having a youth board shaping, implementing, evaluating, and having a real decision-making power. That's where a lot of the gap exists in the literature, and that's where a lot of the initiatives for giving a voice fall short. We're not saying we solved all these problems. By any stretch of imagination, we didn't. However, the conversations we started as a result of the project and the final deliverables had really an impact because now we see youth actually participating in an institutional format within the decision-making process, but also in the national mental health strategy. And youth had a voice across the whole spectrum. From the beginning of the project, when we ran co-design labs, we actually ran in 2 municipal co-design labs, 2, 3, 4 workshops this time, where they gathered around with a strong agenda after the needs analysis to design how these services should be delivered to youth. And then, of course, the validation workshops and the implementation of the national mental health strategy. This is in a nutshell. I went a bit bam, because I know we're running out of time. A lot of this work is on this portal that we do a lot of work on well-being and mental health and ongoing support. And if you want to download the report, it's on UNICEF's website here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Pambos. Thank you also for sharing these resources, and please put them in the chat as well so participants can continue accessing them later. Thank you so much. And you did have some graphic reporting and visuals also in your presentation. I would be happy to invite again to put the spotlight on the visual recording we've been having for this conference as well. For those who just joined, this is the second part of the final conference of the Enhance project. We had the first part dedicated to the practices, and now we're focusing on the policy dimension of the project. And throughout the conference, we have the pleasure of having the help of Visuality for a graphic recording of everything that is being shared. So I think it could be nice to continue seeing the progress of this very nice work that has been done, if possible. And I can see Maria sharing indeed her work. See it there. Thank you very much. So already harvesting and representing everything that has been shared. Of course, this is a work in progress. I'm really amazed by also how fast colleagues are at representing all of this in such a nicely visual way as well. Thank you so much. This work is continuing until the end of the conference, of course, and will be made available afterwards for all of us to continue reflecting on what has been shared and being inspired from it. Thank you. And now we are indeed entering the policy part of this conference. Thank you, Pambos. You're already allowed to do that mental shift somehow from the practices part, but we're going to continue to do that thanks to Angeliki once again, who is going to introduce us to the policy results of the project, and notably the roadmap and the mini booklets that were produced before moving on to the panel discussion.
Lovely, Lisa, and yeah, thank you to everybody that helped us in the spotlight. I know that there are some other projects now currently in the chat that have been shared, so please keep on introducing them. Use the chat to do that. And if you want and if you wish, as we said this morning, you can still reach out to us and we can ask you some questions and do an interview with you and maybe include your practices in the Enhanced Matrix. And with that, because I know that we have some people that were only joining for the first session and some new people only joining now, we will again do like a brief introduction on what we saw this morning. So I will go through my presentation and hopefully you can see it. Just very quickly, once again, in the morning we discussed our aims. Now we will go more into like why enhance, why a project on enhancing learners' voices, and what do we mean by that. So we started working based on identifying a key challenge, and that is that we have several persistent barriers, rigid hierarchies, limited time, and structural inequalities that mute adult learners' voices, even in settings where there is willingness for the learner voice to thrive. And we keep on saying that learners are treated as passive recipients of education. Well, what we come in and say is that adults must actively shape and progress the learning process, not just by being involved in it, but by actually creating learning spaces that are based fundamentally on the learners' voices, that are inherently democratic, and how that can lead to a deeper connection, both with their surroundings, but also the learning topic at hand. So to do that, we all came together from around Europe. We have the EAEA, the European Association for the Education of Adults, Solidar Plus, Farnborough High School, NAT from Hungary, ABC and CNUP from the Netherlands, Das Collective from Austria, Andas from Ireland, and SVEB a date in the consortium as an associated partner from Switzerland. So Sweden, Netherlands, Switzerland, Hungary, Austria, Ireland, and of course, Belgium for the European partners. So how are we doing all of this? We saw in the morning the enhanced interactive matrix and the enhanced podcasts, and now we will go more into the policy roadmap and the enhanced mini booklets, as Ellie already said. So again, the target groups for these results remain the same. We see our target group to be trifold, spreading from the macro to the meso to the micro level, meaning from the policy level, where civil society and policymakers impart knowledge about the basic structures of politics and society, to the work of adult education organizations and networks, whatever that arises, and whatever the relevant positioning in terms of activity and policy, to the very micro level where the people, the content, the methods are approached, especially adult learners that either as individuals or as communities have been subjected to discriminatory behaviors or systemic exclusion, as we said in the morning, that remains. So for the enhanced roadmap, this is the latest outcome of the project that we've been working on, and we've been working on it for quite some time with many learners, with many educators in all of its stages. What we aimed to create is to create a guide that can lead us through the processes that provides space for and enhance the voices of the learners. And to do that, we created the roadmap, we created a set of policy recommendations, and we co-created with learners directly a series of mini booklets. So for this work to begin, we started by targeting adult education practitioners, providers, and policymakers through a publication that we called Discussion Points for Policy and Practice. It's a set of recommendations that we saw through a different lens because we co-created those with 75 educators and learners from around Europe. And based on the discussions and the focus groups we had with them, we saw that it makes more sense to understand who talks when we're talking about the learner voice, who listens, and who does, and what they're talking about, what they're listening to, what they're doing, and how all of these things happen. So we brought all of this together with our learners, with our educators, with the project team. And in the end of this publication, if you would like to have a look at it, you can find it on our website. We also address issues that the learners are interested in, that society is interested in, that we cannot not see. And these are issues of migration, of war, of economic instability, of sustainability, and what the future looks like. Why I'm mentioning that is because we created this publication also with a focus on the promotion for the participation in the European elections of 2024, but also keeping up with what the policymakers, what the members of the European Parliament would be doing once they were elected. So it was very important in these discussions to understand why would the learners be interested in being involved in shaping policy, and how can we actually discuss and how can we actually highlight where their voice can be heard. So in this context, the next step for us was to start designing roadmaps. So to design these roadmaps, we first of all created a methodology. So how do you kickstart this process? We took everything that the learners, the educators, and the policymakers told us in the first step, in the first initial design. And we decided on a methodology that, of course, we kept on changing slowly once we started working with it. But in this methodology, we wanted to create, first of all, a participatory tool. So the methodology itself is open-ended and is open to interpretation, to selection. We have 7 areas that we introduce in this methodology, and we recommend that facilitators or communities that work with the concept can follow. But we also designed a methodological toolkit where you can just find methods from which you can choose if you don't want to follow the path that we followed. And of course, in this methodology, we also give you the annexes, the facilitation checklist, the data sheets, and so on. What is very interesting in this workshop methodology is that we decided to include the authentic voices of the learners, the policymakers, and the educators, once again, that helped us in all of this process. And wherever we had the okay from their side, we also included their names so that they are co-authors officially of this publication. In this, they suggested reroutes for the roadmap. They suggested the schematics. They suggested methodologies. They suggested changes inside the entire approach, but also even before we even got to working on a workshop methodology, we had an initial group that designed even what the rest had in their hands. So it's a process that is very organic, and hopefully if you have a look at it and if you have a read through it, you can understand how organically this came to be. And all of this made us reach the point where we actually created the policy roadmap. It's an interactive tool, but we are currently also working on a publication that also includes a significant policy monitoring aspect at the European level. But for the interactive part, as you can see, we reached a point where we saw that the process should be circular, and it's a process that anybody can define where they're starting from. We have predefined the end of it with the strong and heard voices being the last channel, but we see the elements of building communities with solidarity and recognition, understanding and making space for political representation, including media visibility and public discourse, breaking barriers, either them being interpersonal or systemic, creating engagement strategies and providing material support to lead to community-based actions that take under consideration the limitations of the possibilities for gathering and organizing, but also the opportunities that exist in alternative spaces and methods towards actually creating spaces where listening in policy and practice is feasible. And this comes with training for the educators, but also the institutions that we ask to listen, and all of that turns out to create a context for strong and heard voices. In all of this path, we have several processes that we find are interconnected with all of the steps, and these are quality and accessible information. We have to be talking about safe spaces, intersectionality, and accessibility and belonging. And in our roadmap, I will show it in just a little bit, you can explore all of this universe, let's say, that we created. So last thing that I'm going to mention before we see the tools and we also get to the panel discussion with some amazing people that we have with us. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to close with something that really was born by the communities that it discusses, and these are the enhanced mini booklets. So the enhanced mini booklets, we saw them a little bit in the morning. They address 3 key issues that were identified with the community. And those are breaking the silence of marginalization, migrant women reclaiming their voice, and creating outspoken learning spaces for action in the community. In these booklets, we got together facilitators, learners, and educators, adult educators in Hungary, in the Netherlands, and in Austria. And with methods and processes that were co-designed with the learners, we ended up producing a set of booklets where the learners share their stories with claiming their voice, with experiencing marginalization, and with breaking barriers in actually shaping their learning environments. I will just quickly in a bit go through them so that you can see the methods that we worked with. We worked with interviews, we worked with art therapy, we worked with photo voice. We tried several methods that could work with the group in order to get them to really see this as a space for their own, exploration and means of expression. And when I say they, I'm not talking only about the learners, I'm talking about their educators, I'm talking about the society of these 3 contexts that were involved in the process. And going with the set of booklets, we also have a how to create your own booklet guide. As you can see, as you will see if you open it, it's quite free form, because we know that different methods work for different people. But as we've already established, we have the methodological toolkit, and we have the initial toolkit that we have shared with you, and hopefully this can help everybody find their way through. I am going to now quickly share the enhanced roadmap and just go through it. We have another couple of minutes. So for the enhanced roadmap, you see more languages coming soon. For now, we have the official version in English already done. In order to go through the roadmap, you click on each of the steps where you will find a bit of an explanation what we mean by each of these steps, and also some key action points for policymakers, for civil society and learners, and for providers and practitioners. You can sit with each of the steps. You can start from whichever step you would like. But we also invite you to roam through the reroutes of the main road, because this is where we introduced the key points that came from our workshops. For example, in building communities, it was quite evident that we cannot talk about building communities if we don't talk about solidarity and recognition, or we cannot discuss political representation if we do not discuss media visibility and public discourse and what has to be done on that extent. And of course, in several areas, we needed to see how concepts and how approaches and different lenses were important for us. Intersectionality, for example, was one of the lenses that we saw coming up again and again from the learners themselves and from the educators. Safe spaces was also another part of our work, and what that means for everyone. The roadmap workshop methodology is also available on our website, and you can quickly have a look with me right away. We go from the actual areas that we just mentioned, the tools that we provide to you, to most importantly, maybe the reports on the enhanced workshops and our experience with the learners. You will see that in some cases we have the names of the people included, in some others we do not. This is deliberate. Yeah, I think that it would be a very good opportunity for everyone to actually see how we ended up with what we ended up, and also understand the context under which we decided to have a free form of a roadmap instead of a very rigid structure. So that's what we have in here, from the European to the local level, and of course, checklists, the agendas, the data sheets, anything that you would need to replicate this, and very, very importantly, on the booklets, you can find them available in all 5 languages of the project, in Swedish, in Hungarian, in Dutch, and in German. So I think that with that, we just have a couple of minutes. I would invite everybody to have a look on our website, maybe at a later time, because I know that we have to get to the very interesting policy discussion now. But yeah, thank you for listening once again. And yeah, Ellie, the floor is back to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Angeliki, once again for another very clear and engaging presentation of the project results and more. We are indeed about to move on to the panel discussion, and I'm looking forward to it. But first, I would like to invite you all to show your best smile, if you are okay with the recording and showing your face for a nice picture from this conference. And I hope colleagues will let me know when we're done, because I do not know. But I love to see all of you smiling, of course, so we can keep going like this for a while.
I think this really gets us in a good mood, because we all start smiling.
It helps, right?
Yeah.
It really does.
I will do it one more time.
You are the master.
If you can bear with me another
We can keep smiling, yes.
10 seconds.
We're good?
Yes.
Thank you. And also a couple of people joining just now. So for those who just joined, we were smiling for a picture from this very engaging conference so far, which is now entering a almost final, but in some ways concluding part for the policy discussion on the results of the enhanced project with the panel discussion. So for this, I'm happy to hand the floor over to my colleague Alexandra, who will moderate the panel discussion and introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Elisa, and hello, everyone. So my name is Alexandra, and I work at Solidar Plus as Educational Lifelong Learning Officer. And I have the pleasure to introduce our panelists for today's discussion. So we wanted to discuss how learner participation can be meaningfully embedded in adult education policies. And for these questions, we took inspiration from the Enhanced Roadmap, which Angeliki just presented. With us today, we have Clara Engels-Perregni from the European Commission. She works at the Director General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. We also have Art O'Leary, who is Chief Executive Officer at the Electoral Commission of Ireland. And there's also Conor Thompson, Head of Advocacy and Policy at EANTES, Ireland's National Adult Learning Organization. And we're also still expecting a member of the European Parliament, Marcos Ros Sempere, who will join us in a couple of minutes. So thank you all for being here today. I will ask you 2 rounds of questions. And after the roundtable, there will be a Q&A. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please keep them in mind or write them in the chat, and then we'll make sure to have time to address these questions after the roundtable. So I will just dive straight in and start with a question for Clara. So we just discussed the enhanced roadmap, and the roadmap highlights that there's an importance for supportive environments like community spaces, accessible communication, trust building. How do you think the EU programs can further strengthen these enabling conditions to help more adults engage confidently in learning throughout their lives?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much also for the invitation and also for the demonstration of the project results. And I would like to start with some reflections on your project results, because you have also shown that adult participation in learning doesn't depend only on the availability of courses, but also on the supportive environments around them. And this trust helps then people to engage in the courses and also keep on learning. And this motivation for learning, the importance of motivation for learning is also something which came back in many consultations on the European Year of Skills. And then we try to reflect it also in the communication on the Union of Skills, and most particular in the Connected Basic Skills Action Plan, which concretely recognizes that improving participation in adult learning requires supportive environments, accessible opportunities, and targeted outreach to adults who are the furthest away from learning. So there is a concrete action included in the action plan on this. And I find that the enhanced roadmap makes a very important point, namely when stating that community building is not an extra, but the starting point for participation. And we absolutely share this view that adults engage more confidently when learning is connected to trusted local environments and peer support. And one of the key actions currently which we are working on together with the EU member states is on individual learning accounts. Individual learning accounts can provide a stable infrastructure for adult learning, but adults also need guidance and support to know how to use these opportunities and how to shape their own learning pathways. And especially for adults who had negative or difficult experience with education in the past, much more is needed than simply offering a course or financial support. And here also trusted local outreach and encouragement are often the crucial first steps. And we already see inspiring examples in Europe. I think we will hear some from Ireland. And we also, I would like to highlight one more example. In the Baltic countries, municipalities have adult learning coordinators working closely with citizens. And there are some more examples in other parts of Europe where the local and the wider policy context is connected, and probably this is the most useful way to work together very locally, and bringing that further scaling up. And scaling up is a big challenge because in Europe we see already many good local practices, but they very often remain small scale and project based, and EU funding can help make these approaches more visible and sustainable, and hopefully also easier to mainstream. And for this, a lot of money is needed, and this is highly relevant in the context of discussions on the next multi-annual financial framework of the EU, where member states can use EU funding not only to finance courses, but also to strengthen their adult learning systems more broadly, including guidance, outreach, local partnerships, community learning spaces, and participation structures. And we hope that they will make use of this opportunity, building on many of the projects which are already there, providing some starting points to improve this chain of participation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this very interesting reply. Next up, I would like to turn to Art. Art, drawing on your experience with citizens' assemblies and participatory initiatives, how do you think electoral bodies like the Electoral Commission create more structured and meaningful spaces for citizens, including adult learners, to move from being informed about elections to actively shape democratic processes and debates? Sorry, Art, you're muted.
Oh, geez, there has to be always one, and it's me, sadly. There you go. I wish there was an easy answer to this question, because the answer is not easily, you know. So let's start off with some of the evidence from Ireland. You know, our own data and our own research suggests that about a third of people who didn't vote in our last general election didn't do so because they felt that politics was nothing to do with them, they didn't know who to vote for, or they felt that their single vote couldn't possibly make a difference, you know. And this is, in essence, the challenge for us. You know, we do have to get into people's lives to explain or to make that connection between voting and decisions that affect people's lives, you know. So that's the challenge for us. And the easy answer to this is that we have to meet people where they are, you know. And for many, many years, the state, the big state, has spoken about hard to reach groups and hard to reach people. We don't allow those words in this building because, to our mind, there is no such thing as a hard to reach person or a hard to reach group. There are only hard to reach services. So people with disabilities, the immigrant communities, young people, people living in difficult socioeconomic conditions, they're not hard to reach. They get up every day. They live their lives. They go about their business. It's just that we have never made any attempt to meet them where they are. So that's the challenge for us, is to turn up in ethnic minorities groups and to speak directly to them, using by themselves, and the people with disabilities always say to us, nothing about us without us. So we need to collaborate with people with disabilities, with members of the traveling community, with young people, and we need to bring our expertise married with their experience, and that's how we can make a difference to these people's lives, to make that connection between voting and decisions that affect their lives. So the one group which is particularly hard for us to get to is, of course, young people, and there isn't really a physical space where we can talk to young people except schools, and they're very resistant to people coming in because then it makes democracy all about learning or education, and that's not fun the way that we would like it to be. So we need to be in their digital spaces. We need to be in their virtual lives as well. My youngest two children are teenage girls, and they live their entire lives through the lens of TikTok. Taylor Swift is queen in my house. TikTok is king. Nothing else matters. I would love it if my kids sat down in the evening and watched the television news with me or read the Irish Times or any of the broadsheet newspapers. They don't. They get all their information from TikTok, Instagram, and WhatsApp and Snapchat and all of these things. So these are the spaces that we have. We'll go back to my original point, meet people where they are, and we need to do this in a way that they can understand, not in a way that's boring. We have to be accessible. So we have to be able to explain complicated issues and complicated principles in videos now, which are 30 seconds, which are a challenge to us, but it's a challenge that we are embracing. In our previous general election in 2020, TikTok didn't exist as a way of communicating. In 2024, for our last general election, it was the single most important platform by which we engage with kids, and with young people. And it's not just 18-year-olds and under. These are people under the age of 30. And I'm of an age where I consider people under 30 and under 35 to be young people still. So this is important. So the answer to this is to move away from the more traditional thinking about either turning up in schools or putting ads in newspapers or ads on televisions. We need our messages to be tailored in different silos, multi-layered and multi-siloed, targeted specifically towards specific audience, whether that is young people or the adult community or people with disabilities or traveling communities, ethnic minorities, whatever it is, we have to be all things to all men and women.
Thanks a lot. I think your reply resonated with a lot what we did with the Enhanced project, as you could have seen with based on all the reactions you got. For the next question, I will stay in Ireland and I will turn to Connor. I would like to ask you, so within the Enhanced roadmap, we saw that there's a bigger importance of community-based advocacy and learner-led action. From your experience at EANTIS, what do you think are the most effective ways to support learners in moving from sharing experiences to actually influencing policy and public debate?
Thanks, Alexandra, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. Ireland is overrepresented on the panel, maybe because we're taking over the presidency in, I think, 19 days now. So that's interesting, maybe how policy at European levels is filtering into our project discussion today as well. But I suppose it touches on some points already mentioned, like by Claire around trust and environment, and also by Art. Expressing that kind of distaste for the expression of hard to reach groups, and that would completely align and resonate with our own work. Like as the National Adult Learning Organization, our approach is completely grounded in adult education principles as a fundamental start point. And I think when we're supporting learners to move from sharing experiences into influencing public debate and policy at a kind of more active level, it comes back to that. And essentially, it won't be news to a lot of people here today that that's grounded in inequality between the learner and educator, and that both people in that dialogue, in that meeting place of education, can be learner and educator at the same time. Like if you go into an adult education space and an environment, you know, people don't sit in rows, people sit in circles. You can walk into an adult education classroom in much of the sector in Ireland, across Europe and the world, particularly in the adult education services and further education and training here in Ireland, as the terminologies that we use. You could walk into that room, see people sitting in a circle, and you know it's working if you can't identify the teacher in the space. And I think it fundamentally starts there and kind of comes back to Art's point around services being hard to reach rather than groups of people, and it's around valuing knowledge equally, not within hierarchies, that the educator knows everything and is imparting that knowledge to the learner, but that people's lived experiences are brought into that space. And how that links then into learner voice and advocacy is that our approach is to create that environment and trust, like Clara mentioned earlier, and that kind of scaffolding around that process that makes those education principles a kind of reality within the policy process. Like the roadmap mentions that, like in the first section mentions belonging, um, as well, and it's creating that sort of space within how you imagine this to take place. I think then within that, it's supporting people with the information and understanding they need to participate. So as I mentioned actually in our breakout session earlier, like our work is influenced by a woman called Jane McAlevy's work, trade union organizer in the US, and her mantra, which we take into our work, is that people understand to the extent they participate and participate to the extent that they understand. So if we are planning a campaign ourselves at Aintus and we want to have learner voices included in that campaign, we'll run a Learners as Leaders program in advance, whereby learners can attend the training, can, you know, engage in, say, expert facilitators or engage with our own expertise, like my colleague Rebecca Jackson, who's on the call today, our policy and advocacy officer, might run through the budgeting process if it's consultation around budget, around budget and resourcing within the sector. My colleagues on the call, Larissa, who's part of the project and facilitated today, and Ruby ran a Learners as Leaders program last summer, which was a deep learning program, was a residential one with follow-up coaching for community education learners to initiate their own initiatives, but then took part in a campaign we ran. So again, in those settings, Ruby, Larissa, Rebecca are all equal partners in the learning journey with the participants themselves, that are then given the information they need to understand and participate, and then build their understanding through participation. And I think that's kind of the start point, and then around that, it's about kind of having those enabling supports. In our breakout room earlier, Paul O'Shea, who's a member of the Learner Voices group in Cork in the south of Ireland, spoke about having the support and buy-in of staff members like Nuala, who presented briefly there just before the break. So you know, people need the resources and conditions to participate fully. And I think that links then into the roadmap, like step 2. So when people are looking at the roadmap, kind of, I think it really outlines those processes well. That'll kind of maybe like build on what I've just mentioned there.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now I would like to turn again to the European Commission, to Clara. So do you see any opportunities for the European Commission to further encourage innovation in how adult learning systems listen to and work with learners so that the participation we've been talking about becomes more continuous, inclusive, and meaningful across different contexts in the EU?
Yes, basically the European Commission has two main means of support. One is through policies, and the second one is through projects and funding in general. And in policies, we can repeat and pick up messages which are important in this context. And some of these are very nicely spelled out in the roadmap and also in the booklet referenced. So I would like to highlight a few, two or three of them. One is what I see is crucial to move from occasional consultation towards continuous learner participation as a part of how adult learning systems should function. And the other key message I would highlight here is that listening only works if learners see that there is a visible follow-up and real influence. Otherwise, their participation risks to become symbolic, and then their involvement risks to become also risks to fade away. And I think it's also very important, which is also one of the main messages of the project, that very often institutions ask learners for feedback only at the end of the course, when most important decisions have already been taken. And this should also change, and real participation should start much earlier, when learners can actually shape how learning is organized and communicated and delivered from the beginning. So this learner-centeredness is very important in my view. We see it already in higher education, where student-centered learning is a very common term and used already for decades, or in any case more than 15 years. And there it's easier to implement it because there are strong structures for student participation, which is much more difficult in our context. And this is where I come to my second point, which I already pointed to in my first intervention, that this cooperation between local and regional structures to create a systemic involvement of learners would be important. And this is a message which can be also given through policy documents. So these stronger national frameworks and institutionalized channels are the key enablers for learner voice in a sustainable way, to listening to learner voice in a sustainable way. And I believe we can also foster this through our projects, how we formulate the requirements for projects, because if such requirements are embedded in the calls already, then these have to be addressed by the applicants. So this is where the funding part could play a role. And there is one more thing which is which we very often stress in the context of skills policies in general, but also education policies in general, that there are different policy domains that contribute to a successful education policy or skills policy, and these different policy domains need to be well coordinated, and this still doesn't happen sufficiently in many of the countries, and I think this is something which should be um, tried to we should all try to suggest this at all levels to be listened to. A closer coordination between education, skills, employment, and social policies, but also transport. I know from my participation once in an Aeon test event how what an obstacle transport is actually for learners in Ireland, and I think also in many other countries, but also childcare or digital access, because learner participation depends on how these systems work together in practice and how they enable the learners to be active learners and continue learning, and also continue sharing their views more broadly. So I hope we can advocate for this from our end with the governments to establish such cooperation between policy domains. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this really interesting answer to the question. You mentioned necessary things like childcare and so on. Connected to this, I would like to ask Connor. So we've seen in the enhanced roadmap, there's some structural barriers like lack of childcare, language issues, socioeconomic constraints, and these are central in the roadmap. And how do you think civil society organizations like EANTIS can ensure that learners with fewer opportunities that face more structural barriers than others are not only included, but can also actively shape the advocacy agenda?
Yeah, thanks, Alexandra. Yeah, they're very much linked to your point there, Clara, around connecting different policy domains. I think that's like a really like kind of universal kind of objective or aim for a lot of different actors across the adult learning sector in Ireland and Europe. But I think from our experience in this, I can maybe just share like two examples, potentially like at a policy level. For instance, there's a recent example. So Larissa popped into the chat our Learner Voices Across Ireland report from last year, which is a collation of 10 or 12 different regional adult learner forums that we run in partnership with education and training boards across Ireland. And then there's regional reports for each education and training board, and then a collated national report. And within that, financial supports comes up year on year as an issue, not only the level of support that's needed, but also the potential confusion around multiple different funding streams. This is something like again, like we were hearing through our research, we were hearing through work with colleagues on the ground, flagging this as an issue. So we had the evidence for that. We ran a campaign in 2024 on this called Holding You Back around these issues, and we're kind of slowly chipping away at this on this issue. The current government and their program for government said that there'll be a review into this, and then the most recent further education and training strategy that was launched last week has a commitment in it to work from the Department of Further and Higher Education, and it's written in black and white directly with the Department of Social Protection, who is responsible for giving these supports directly. So I suppose whilst we haven't seen whole scale change there, like I think it's a good example of kind of just chipping away at different kind of policy levels that we then end up with a policy commitment over the next 4 years to look at this and address it and sort it out. And I think that's where we've moved from getting the learner feedback to taking it on at that level. A more potentially kind of more participative example is maybe around transport. So one of the good practices shared is the Further Education and Training Students' Union in Tipperary Education and Training Board. So that's a quite large region in Ireland, and the providers of adult learning, apprenticeships, vocational education and training, who in the last 5 years or so have set up a student council. They identified transport as a key issue. It was identified in our research in the area as well. So as a student council, they looked at what they could do about it. So it wasn't within their own education providers' remit to improve transport connections in their area. So now they are actually on their local county council, they're like local governments, local transport committee. So there's a learner voice on the committee feeding in the issues that learners are facing in the area around timetabling, and they've managed to get timetables improved and aligned, better aligned to class start time. So we can kind of see, I suppose, in those examples, like the two levers of supporting that bottom up participation, but then civil society organizations like ourselves trying to join the dots across those policy domains on different issues. And I think that within that, I think there's a lot to kind of be done, and you've got different mechanisms that you can kind of push and pull in terms of like legislation, in terms of supporting bottom up, like grassroots organizing there. And I suppose it's around picking the tactics to match your goal, is sort of the message I might have there.
Thanks a lot. To continue, I would like to refer back to what you said, Art, about the fact that kids are reading a lot of news through social media, through TikTok and so on. We also see in general in society that there's a context of rising disinformation, manipulative online behavior. How do you think electoral bodies and adult education systems can work together to build long-term democratic resilience, to ensure that citizens are not just protected, but also empowered to actively safeguard democratic integrity?
Thanks, Alexandra. Yeah, another challenge. You know, I speak to my counterparts all over the world all the time, and this is the number one issue on every agenda whenever we meet. You know, it's this rise of mis and disinformation, particularly around electoral matters, which can affect the electoral integrity. You know, it doesn't really make any difference whether it's true or not, but if people perceive that there's a problem with the electoral register, the electoral roll, or the voting process or the counting process, then that's a challenge that we have to deal with, you know. And I used to think a couple of years ago that we could regulate our way out of this problem, but we can't, you know, because it is too enormous to place the entire responsibility for this on the social media platforms. Yet, can they do more? Yes, of course they can. But can they solve this problem by themselves? Absolutely not. You know, the answer to all of these challenges is always education, information, public engagement. You know, we speak about media literacy and we speak about digital literacy, but I think we need to move beyond that. I mean, we're talking about competence in this area, or an elite level understanding, creating that. And that's the challenge, you know, because people talk about mis and disinformation, and they're basically talking about young people not being able to differentiate. I'll go back to my daughters, and they hate me talking about them, but they're not bad at ferreting out mis and disinformation. I worry about my 86-year-old mother, you know, who has an iPad in one screen and a television in the corner of the room. And they're both screens from which she gets information, and she can't tell the difference between them. So this is a lifelong challenge. It's not just something that we have to deal with young people. We have to deal with at every age from birth to death in the entire life cycle. So we can do this in a number of ways. Again, I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier on. It's all about targeted messaging. It's all about education. It's all about connecting with people and explaining to them in a way that they can understand. And we ran a mis and disinformation campaign last year, which went viral only because of the simplicity of it, and this again comes back again to how you deal with some of these challenges. The essence of our campaign was that there is one day of the year where you question everything that you see and you read and you hear. And that day is April Fool's Day. So what we say to people that during an election campaign, treat every day like April Fool's Day. Ask you, when you see something which doesn't seem quite right, ask yourself, where did it come from? Who benefits from this? And where can we go to check whether it's true or not? Because ultimately, this is about, it's a very personal thing for everybody. Identifying trusted sources of information is the challenge. You need to have somewhere where you can go, where you'll get the right information. And that's it for us. So all of our work in this area is reaching out to people and understanding their use of media, and then helping or supporting them in this role about where to identify their own trusted sources of information, and to question everything that they read and see and hear when it comes to elections, because electoral integrity is very simple in my view. People have to have confidence in the process so they can trust the result. Anything that affects either that confidence or that trust is a challenge for us, and we can't sit on our hands, because the long-term solution to this is education. So we can build this into primary schools, into secondary schools, etc. But that's going to take us 25 years to solve completely. And what do we do in the meantime for all the adults who are getting up every day and living their lives and getting information from a variety of different sources? We have to be in all of these spaces, meeting people where they are and guiding them and supporting them, and often us being that trusted source of information.
Thanks so much. And sorry, Connor, you want to
Yeah, could I
add
just
something?
come in there actually
Yeah.
on that on what Art hit on there. I think that like it is one of the great like challenges of our time for sure, and it's so rapidly changing so quick, like we all know that. I don't need to labor that point at all, but what I think from our experience and recent experience in developing a handbook and piloting at the moment some workshops around that, called the Community Education Against Disinformation Handbook, which actually we could add to the matrix as well, because it was an action research project that was developed alongside and co-designed with learners and educators. It's very much a live doc, and my colleague Larissa, who's here today, just piloted 2 session workshops of it last week. So we're gonna be assessing the feedback and seeing how we go forward with it. But I think that to your point, Art, around adult education, it's that within that setting that we need to bring, and within, again, like working with learner voice practice and principles, is to bring curiosity and not certainty to those conversations, and to really provide space for people to talk about difficult and challenging circumstances. Like I'm always reminded of a really inspirational person who's a rapper in America called Killer Mike. And I remember at the time, he's based in Atlanta in Georgia, around the Black Lives Matter movement, of him making a very powerful speech. And in that he said, meet me in the middle, I'm here. And I think that as we see a more polarized society, adult education can potentially provide that space, because like education isn't neutral. Education isn't fundamentally good in and of itself. What we're seeing is in Ireland, across Europe, and across the world, but particularly in our context, is a politicization and a political education that is being dominated by like bad actors, often like from outside the country at times as well, that are aiming to disrupt, cause hatred, and foment distrust within our society, and that is actually kind of an education and a learning process there. So what we need in response to that, I suppose, is resourced adult education spaces that can provide that counter space for people to potentially meet in the middle with curiosity, and to ensure that like human values win out. We don't have all the answers, but we're developing our workshops at the moment that can potentially support the sector to do that, which in the adult learning sector in Ireland is already active in that space as well.
Thanks a lot for this very important addition. We're still awaiting the arrival of MEP Marcos Rosempere. I see that his assistant is connected. Alvaro, if you can hear me, could you let us know what time Marcos could join us?
Yeah, actually he's connecting, so he will be
I see.
he will appear.
He's
Okay.
just in the waiting room. We've
Okay,
summoned
perfect.
him.
Okay, perfect.
Great. Then we'll take a moment for Marcos to connect. Hello, Marcos.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks a lot for joining us. I know it's been a very busy day for you, so thanks a lot for making time out of your very busy schedule for the roundtable. We've already listened to some interventions of the other speakers. So we've heard about the perspective of the European Commission, of the Electoral Commission in Ireland, and also of EANTIS, which is a civil society organization in Ireland. But of course, you will also listen to the perspective of the European Parliament on these questions. So I will dive straight in. So the enhanced roadmap stresses that learner participation often remains symbolic and without real influence. From a legislative and/or a governance perspective, how do you think the European Parliament can ensure that adult learners move from consultation to actual decision-making power in EU education policies?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and sorry for the delay on entering into this meeting. As you have mentioned, it's been a very complicated day, but I am here. And regarding your question, I think that it is true that participation is very often treated as bureaucratic procedure instead of a real exercise in democratic influence. If learners are only consulted after decisions have already been drafted, I think that to be honest, the participation becomes only symbolic rather than democratic. And from the European Parliament's perspective, the first step is to try to institutionalize participation instead of depending on isolated initiatives or political goodwill, because I think that learner participation must become a structural element of EU policy making in education and lifelong learning. We already have useful examples at European level, such as the EU Youth Dialogue, the Youth Test, promoted by the Committee of the Regions and the European Economic Social Committee, or the participatory methods used during the Conference of the Future of Europe. So these are three examples, and all of these initiatives they show that citizens, especially young people and learners, can contribute meaningfully when participation is organized, well organized early, transparently, and continuously. But the key issue is accountability. People usually need to see that their voices actually shape outcomes. If not, we are doing nothing. And this is why I strongly agree with one of the central ideas of the enhanced roadmap, which is institutions must not only listen, but also explain what what things changed because of that participation. I think that this accountability is very important, and in this sense, I strongly agree with several priorities that have been identified in your roadmap, and I believe that there are 3 areas where we could start improve. We should create more permanent and structured participation mechanisms for adult learners at European level. Secondly, I think that participation must be supported materially, and not it is not only a willingness. We need to give a good support. And thirdly, learner participation should be connected to governance and funding. I think that we have initiatives such as Erasmus Plus, European Social Fund Plus, or adult learning initiatives that are being supported through the skills agenda should include stronger requirements on participatory governance and co-design with learners. I don't want to be very long, but I think that we should try to broaden our understanding of democratic participation. And this, for us, for me, and member of the Social and Democratic group, the participation is not only a question of elections. I think that democracy also means participation in the policy that we shape in our everyday life. So I think this is the real challenge that we have now.
Thanks a lot. So you mentioned quite a lot of things we totally agree with in the frame of the Enhanced project. You mentioned the concept of accountability and its importance. But then also we saw that in the discussions also earlier today that visibility is really also a key condition for participation. In your perspective, what role can the Parliament play in making adult learners and lifelong learning more visible in EU public discourse and political priorities, especially compared to other education sectors?
Okay, in this regard, I do agree. You have mentioned that, and your report has mentioned that the roadmap, that invisibility very often leads to political marginalization. If adult learners are absent from public discourse, they also have the risk to be absent from political priorities, funding decisions, and institutional attention. And this is particularly important because lifelong learning is no longer a secondary issue. In today's Europe, shaped by digital transformation, demographic change, migration, climate transition, and evolving labor markets, lifelong learning is essential for both social inclusion and democratic resilience. It's not a question of people that couldn't have enough learning when they were young. Now it's necessary for everyone. And the European Parliament has an important responsibility here because visibility is also political. Institutions help define what Europe considers important. And first, Parliament can contribute by consistently treating adult education and lifelong learning as strategic priorities, not only as a labor market tools, but also as a democratic and social rights. When we are focusing on lifelong learning, very often we say that it is for our competitiveness, for our labor market, but it is also a question of democratic values and inclusion. And this is that this is a question very important, and adult education is still remaining underrepresented despite its enormous social and democratic impact. Secondly, I think that the Parliament can amplify the voices of the learners directly. One aspect of the Enhanced project, your project, that I particularly value a lot is including through the podcast discussion we shared the idea that learners should not only be spoken about, but should speak for themselves. Storytelling, testimonies, podcasts, community media, and participatory forums are powerful because they humanize policy debates and make live realities visible. I think that we should create more spaces in the European Parliament where adult learners, educators, and civil society organizations can participate directly in hearings, consultations, and public events, because visibility grows when institutions open their doors, our doors, to people whose experiences are usually missing from policymaking spaces. And thirdly, communication matters enormously. In this sense, I strongly agree with the roadmap, your enhanced roadmap, when it highlights that technical or bureaucratic language can itself become a barrier, a border. I have always defended that European institutions must improve the accessibility of communication through clear language, multilingual formats, digital accessibility, and outreach beyond already engaged audiences. And finally, I think that visibility must also include recognitions. Adult learners are very often viewed only in terms of deficits, as people lacking skills or needing reintegration, and we should instead recognize them as an active contributors to our society, our democracy, and local communities. And I believe that lifelong learning should be understood as part of the European social model, not only, I have mentioned before, because it improves employability and competitiveness, but because it strengthens participation, critical thinking, social cohesion, and democratic engagement. So for me, visibility that you have asked for is not simply about communication, it is about political recognition. When adult learners become visible, their voices become harder to ignore, and democratic becomes stronger and more inclusive as a result. I'm very convinced of that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for these answers. And thanks to all the speakers. These were my questions for you. I know, Marcos, that you will need to leave right away, but thanks again for joining us. And also thanks for mentioning the Enhanced podcast that indeed you also participated in. So for the participants that are interested, please check the podcast out on the website. For the speakers that can still stay with us, we're a bit over time, but I would still like to allow for a short Q&A. So if any one of the participants have any questions or comments with the speakers, please feel free to either raise your hand and say your comment right away, or to write it in the chat. Yeah, Angeliki, please.
Yeah, I think that already in the chat there are quite a few mentions and a lot of tools, and also a lot of discussions happening. So thank you to anyone that was posting that while we were talking. What I would like to mention, maybe briefly, but I think it's a very important element that we came across during the project, and it really touched what especially Art and Connor mentioned on getting to the places of people and meeting people in the middle. What we also found out as very relevant for the learner's voice is that we need to also open up our approach and understand that when we're talking about learner voice, we're not only talking about citizens' voice, because a lot of times we work with people that do not have citizenship, and we need to establish processes that relate to the voice of those learners that cannot take part in electoral processes, without that meaning that they should not be, of course, informed about the electoral processes, about the people in power, about the very context under which they could be included, and in synergy with whom they could be included. And in the work that we've done, you can see that in the roadmap, but also if you have a look at the good practices of the matrix, there are plenty of those that also touch on the issue of citizenship as a pre-requirement for the learner's voice a lot of times, and how we can move past that and how we can link that to citizens' initiatives that can help us in all of this. So I wanted to also mention it, because I think that it's a very important element of our work.
Thanks a lot for mentioning this, Angeliki. Does anyone has a question or a follow-up comment on the panel discussion? I see that Marina posted something in the chat. I can read out your comment, or if you want, you can also ask it straight away. It depends on what you prefer.
Sure, I can say it.
Yeah,
it's more of a
thank you.
comment than a question, but yes, so throughout the conference, I kept thinking about how important the voices of real people are, and how actually it would be amazing if the decision makers and policymakers had the time to listen to these stories, because it's very different to hear someone speaking about their life and what adult education does for them than to read summarized text in a policy paper or something. So yeah, I just think it would be a great way to connect between the very tops and the very bottoms of our society. And as Angeliki said, we're not just talking about citizens, because not everyone has the same rights. So I think it's one of the important parts of talking about adult education in Europe now.
Thanks a lot. Given the timing, I would now maybe propose to go to Angeliki, who can give the concluding remarks and also have a look at Visuality's creation.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you to the speakers and everybody that really made this possible, and of course the audience. And I know that we also have some of the learners with us. So thank you everybody for being here. I think that I speak for everyone in saying that although this was an online conference, we still had the opportunity to be quite dynamic. So first, for the final remarks, I would like to give the floor to Maria from Visuality to go through the entire day, if that's possible. So Maria, I don't know if you can hear me, and you can unmute yourself and take us on this journey, this visual journey.
Yes, sure. Hello, everybody. You're not seeing my face, but you're seeing the work. So I think that's really the most interesting thing. Well, from the morning, we have made two visuals, one to summarize the podcast workshop, the different levels in which it's working, the micro, the meso, and the micro, and also some of the things that jumped out to the both the people that had listened, but also the people that participate in the process of creating the podcasts. On the other hand, we had the enhanced matrix, which my colleague Pauline was the one in the session. So I cannot speak much to it because I wasn't present, but from there, I do see that she captured some key elements. The element of empowerment and self-confidence also came out in the podcast and is also present here, which I think it's a very nice red thread throughout the project. And also some best practices were shared. I do have a very beginning initial capture of the spotlighted project, which is not quite finished because it was so fast, but I still plan to complete it. I think the main ideas are already there, but the visuals not quite. And now, last but not least, of the panel, which was very interesting, of going from voice to policy. I think to me jumped out a lot the relationship between adult learning and democratic participation through empowering people with media literacy and critical thinking skills. How trust is crucial for learning and needs to be supported by participation and support that goes beyond just the financial. How policies need to be well coordinated in order to support adult learning and democratic participation, and the need to meet people where they are through a communication that is targeted where they get their information, which nowadays very often is online through social media, etc. And also on the importance of bringing visibility to adult learning so that it gets the political recognition that it deserves.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maria. And of course, thanks to Pauline as well for doing all of this in, at the same time where we're all talking so much. I think it's a wonderful way to see all that we have achieved and all that we have done. So thank you so much for your work. And with that, because the time is already running, I would like to again thank you all for being here. I would like to just point to just a couple of things for looking forward. I think it's always quite strong emotionally, but also in terms of the imperative that we experience in our work in adult learning and education, in saying that what we're doing is not just what happens in the classroom. It's also the opportunity to have the spaces, the opportunity to learn something outside of the norm or of formality. It's as MEP Marcos Ross already said, it's outside of the need to be competitive. This is in itself a political statement. And it becomes more and more of a political statement the more that we see our communities becoming closer to racism, to bigotry, to ideologies that really suppress and oppress other people. And at the end of the day, we think that the only way forward is making sure that we are vocal, that we are present, and that we are there, and we are disruptive in a sense of the space that is given when it's not what we want it to be, in order for us to change it. And sometimes this can be uncomfortable, but most times it is actually fitting more and more and more of us only if we dare to listen. And I found that especially moving, that this is what came out of our workshop on the podcast. I want to thank Larissa for also her instigating this reflection time where we went outside of the screen and we just had the space to listen to the voice, and only to the voice of the learners. Thank you to Alex for doing a wonderful job from the very beginning on leading the process on the matrix. And I think that this is a project that from its very beginning was co-created, so it really belongs to all of us, and you're part of it now. So you're in the lot. So please have a look at what we've done even after this event. That's what's most important. We thank you, of course, for being here today, but it's what we do after that that is the best thing that we can do. So with that, we will keep in touch. We will send you the material, the presentations, the visual representation. We will try to keep us as connected as possible to you throughout the years, because this doesn't end here. And thank you so much, and have a lovely day from my side. I don't know, Alex, Ellie, if you have anything to say. Yes, thank you, everybody.
Just a big thank you to you too, Angeliki and EAEA, also for the excellent coordination of the whole project throughout these years. So thanks a lot, and not only for the contribution today. So thank you very much, and also a big thank you to all participants and speakers from our side. And enjoy the rest of your day and the results of the Enhance project, of course. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I have just a tiny question? Maria, can I ask you for a favor? I don't know if it's possible, so you can
Should
say
we
that.
leave?
So